Hi, this is Richard Moon with Geographic Solutions. Recently, I was introduced to Robert Forte, lead case manager for Metro Community Ministries in San Diego, and the co-chair of the Reentry Roundtable's Policy and Procedure Subcommittee. I was so impressed that I asked Robert if we could conduct an interview to commemorate National Second Chance Month.
Geographic Solutions is the provider of the Virtual One-Stop Reentry Employment Opportunity Solution, or VOS-RIO. This is a corrections workforce portal designed exclusively for justice-involved job seekers. VOS-RIO helps individuals discover their second chance by providing the tools needed to quickly find meaningful employment upon release. In this second of 3 segments, Robert gives his views on recidivism and the obstacles people face when leaving prison. He talks about his work at Metro Community Ministries and gives advice he has for those returning to society.
Robert, there are many factors that impact recidivism, correct?
Well, yeah, and you know what? I'm going to agree with you wholeheartedly. But what I will share with you is that one of the things that I've learned since I've got out of prison and returned back to school, and when I realized what I missed while I was there, was the fact that prison programs don't dive deep enough into social and emotional trauma, social and emotional awareness. They don't dig out what's really what an individual needs to release. He still goes home with secrets, and secrets still keep him sick, you know. And I started to realize that, and it kind of gave me insight on how to help the clients that I work with now today. That the programs are there, and they offer a great opportunity for people to gain insight and wisdom about their own behavior, if that's what they're looking for.
Right.
Sometimes we're going to run into the guy or the population that they only want the programs to get away from the yard. They only want the programs to get the milestones and get released.
Right.
And realistically, whether it's childhood trauma or the adult trauma or the trauma of incarceration, those things the prison programs need to work on and need to look at from a holistic standpoint.
What obstacles does one face when released from custody, and how did you overcome those obstacles?
There's quite a few obstacles.
Yeah, yeah,
I'll say the very first one that you face when you're released is understanding that you're not in prison anymore. Removing the conditioning that you were subjected to or you subjected yourself to. Um, Having a clear definition of what freedom is really challenging while you're still on parole. But I will say that I had some advantages. Um, the parole officer that I had basically told me I was on high control, and they came and picked me up from prison. And he told me, he said, "Mr. Forte, you got two choices." And he says, "Now I'm gonna lay them out for you." He says, "If you do everything right, I work for you. If you do anything wrong, you work for me." And I can understand that, and it was clear. And the fact that I had already had a plan in place, I knew what my reentry plan was 2 years before I was released. I knew what I wanted to do and how I was going to do it. I just needed to make sure that the resources or the support existed when I got out, and there
yeah.
was no guarantee of that. But at the same time, I went right into treatment. I didn't go to the streets. I continued on with a regimen of with a foundation and support, instead of just jumping out there and just trying to interact in the community without building myself a support basis. So I'm asking myself, is that what I want to do? Is that how I see myself? Is that how God designed me?
Hmm.
And I couldn't see it. So I had my battles with me were the fights I was having. They weren't battles with anybody else. They weren't battles with parole. They weren't battles with my family. They were battles that I had to defeat the old me,
Yeah.
the one that grew up with all this stuff and all this baggage. I had to get rid of him. And it took me, honestly, from being released from prison until I was um, sound enough to say I'm sound, it took about 4 years.
Yeah.
It took about
Mm.
4 years, and it took 4 years of hard work.
Yeah.
And I would recommend that every parolee that has any type of social and emotional issues or any type of trauma, that part of that healing, besides therapy, is education. You know, when I realized that I could be a drug and alcohol counselor, it wasn't until I realized why I was using and what caused the symptoms of use, you know, and how
Yeah.
to go back and rectify those things in my life.
Robert, tell me about your work with Metro Community Ministries and how your personal experience helps you in your work with clients.
Well, for Metro, I'm actually the regional case manager here in San Diego or Southern California. And Metro's program is designed to assist older offenders. And I was really happy when I found out about their program and their funding, because all the programs prior to that were for 16 to 24-year-olds. There was nothing out there that really addressed the older offender or the repeat
Right.
offender. And after completing get my drug and alcohol certification, I started taking classes that were really related to trauma, because I knew most individuals that were my age or over the age of 25, if they were repeat offenders, it was something else going on that they had not either revealed, discovered, or been able to deal with. And so I looked at what Metro was offering, and I said, well, okay, I can use what they're offering plus my own lived experience and the things that I've learned. And if the client is willing, I would be able to help them. So uh, with Metro, I have as a case manager, I get referrals from parole, probation, the DA's office, restorative practice agencies within the DA's office, and other organizations. And I do an initial assessment, but a lot of what I do more is hands-on. I'm trying to meet the client exactly where they are, but at the same time, I'm setting real small goals initially, small case management steps for the client,
Hmm.
so they can start to build some self-esteem, some self-worth. And even with self-worth and self-esteem being built, as long as there's still things going on internally, socially, emotionally, and mentally, the client's going to reach a certain plateau, and then he's going to self-destruct again,
Hmm.
because secrets still keep you sick. And
Yeah.
that's one of the challenges that most of the clients have, is getting rid of all their baggage. I have an old saying that we all have baggage, whether it's Louis Vuitton or whether it's the homeless guy with a trash bag, but it's
Yeah.
still baggage. And one of the professors that I had told me, he said, Mr. Forte, you're going to be a great counselor. He said, but you got to learn how to clean your plate too. He says, I'm a therapist and I see a therapist. And that was one of the things I did before I even started with Metro. I had been on the streets. I had been working for a church. I had created a program for kids, and I noticed that I still was being overwhelmed and bogged down emotionally about, the fear of success or the fear of failure, and
Hmm.
not wanting to address my own issues. And I did it again. I talked to my professor and I said, hey, I'm going to check myself into a different level of therapy, because I still want to know what's going on with me
Yeah.
and what's wrong with my brain.
What is your philosophy on successful reentry?
It's challenging because it's not an overnight process.
Right.
For me, I'll say, as a human being, learning how to relive life and how to be responsible, it gave me a clear indication of why there's so many homeless. And I feel blessed that my level of resilience may be a little different or a little higher than others. But
Yes.
one of the things, I've experienced homeless before. I've been on the run before. I had to look at all those indicators on how I got there and the choices that I made, and each time I could see the choices that I made, I took a shortcut. And I felt like that I could worm my way through something. And that's not, and we all know that's not how life is.
Yeah.
But the conditioning that you get that comes along with trauma, incarceration, um, I don't blame my dad for being absent. I blame the lack of grooming. Every male needs a mentor. Every male needs to be groomed. A mom can only do so much.
Yeah.
Without the discipline and the guidance and that visual figure of someone doing the right thing, and you can see how it pays off.
Yeah.
And once I was able to grasp all those things, it became easier and easier every day. Of course, I still had challenges. Um, I, I had a relapse, and it wasn't even on drugs. It was in my head. It was all behavior, And so I had to ask myself, why am I afraid to be a good person, to be a successful person? Why am I afraid to give back? And one of the things that helped me with that was that, when I started working for a church here in San Diego, actually St. Stephen's, and the bishop that actually helped me just passed. But one of the things that I had did when I was in prison is I was trying to give back before I got out. I had started working on creating programs for kids. I created a program in the prison for fathers that were lifers that had kids that were in prison. So both the father and the son were both incarcerated. And I was trying to figure out what kind of program can I create to break that inheritance? How do we break that chain? And it just became so challenging to me that I just didn't want to give up. I wanted to succeed at this. So it's a beautiful thing, but it is an ongoing process.
Yeah. Robert, you have an entrepreneurial spirit about you. What advice would you give to a justice involved individual who is considering starting their own business?
Well, I'm gonna tell you, I took advantage of a couple of things. Um, I took a couple of home study courses in regards to being a paralegal until I could get out. I wanted to understand the law. I spent a lot of my time, whether it was in the prison programs, the rest of my time I spent in the prison library. So my advice to anybody that wants to um, foster and develop change in their life is, first of all, it's the environment. I mean, you can be in the jungle, but then, up in the canopies, it's safe. So in the programs and in the library, it was safe, and I was also learning at that point in time, without knowing it, that I was retraining my brain to read, study, comprehend. And, so to really answer your question is, one, you have to look at things realistically from incarceration, and I remember there was a point in time I didn't know what a feasibility study was. I didn't know what market analysis was. So you have to dive in deep enough and challenge yourself every step of the way. Or if not, you're looking for an easy way out. And being an entrepreneur is not easy.
Mm-mm.
Having a vision and a dream, we all have them, but are we willing to sacrifice to live them? So I'd say that'd be the best advice. Continue to educate yourself, especially in the area that you want to be good at. But even beyond that, the areas, the foundations underneath, learning law, starting to read again, being disciplined, those things all play a part in wanting to own a company and have a company, because you have to be disciplined to do those things. One of the things I tell my clients all the time is you cannot be in charge of anything until you're in charge of yourself.
Thank you for watching the second segment of the Robert Forte interview. Please stay tuned for the last segment.